Hi, welcome to the SAIC studio. For those joining us for the first time, we're live from SAIC's headquarters in Reston, Virginia. My name is Brad Curran. I'm an industry analyst with Frost & Sullivan. I'm joined by Josh Jackson, Senior Vice President of SAIC's Army Business Unit, and Greg Fortier, Vice President of SAIC's Army Business Unit. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you today. We'll be discussing the pressing and complex issue of unmanned aerial systems and how they pose a threat to militaries and law enforcement agencies worldwide. Counter Unmanned Aerial Systems, commonly known as CUAS, is more than a $1 billion market, and it's growing fast, more than 10% a year, because of the proliferation and weaponization now of unmanned aerial systems. Today, in the next few minutes, we'll cover the latest advancements, challenges, and counter-UAS solutions that can ensure mission effectiveness against evolving threats. Before we begin, we'd like to remind you to use the chat for any questions or comments you may have. We'll have time for a question and answer session at the end. With that said, let's dive in. Gentlemen, what are some of the potential threats posed by unmanned aerial systems, and how can they be addressed?
So I'll give you a couple of thoughts, and then Greg can certainly weigh in. So I think you mentioned it kind of in your opening. It's, the weaponization of unmanned aerial systems as well as the proliferation. One example is if you look at what's going on in the, Russo-Ukrainian war right now, they're talking about tens of thousands of UASs, right, being deployed as well as, mitigated, killed in a given month. So just the sheer volume.
By both sides.
Yeah. Just the sheer volume of that activity, I don't think we've ever seen before in a conflict. So that gives you a glimpse of what might happen in the future, and it's probably only going to accelerate exponentially after that. So it's, again, the two things that I really think about are the weaponization and the creativity around the weaponization as well as the proliferation, just the sheer volume and numbers.
Yeah, those great comments. I would also add, whether it's stateside or whether it's internationally or geopolitically, certainly this idea of pervasive surveillance is a threat anywhere. So that could be on a national border, it could be at an airport, it could be at a sporting event, it could certainly be in the Russo-Ukrainian war. The ability to have that pervasive surveillance is really the biggest threat for any ground force in a combat situation or any domestic situation as well. The other piece of it is, and Josh hit on a little bit, is the ability to mass fires rapidly in a swarming type of scenario. So certainly a threat there. And then as you piece all that together and you piece together the ability to swarm and then the ability to be pervasively visual, you then have an advanced command and control node and system for any foe. And that could be a domestic challenge on a border. It could be somebody wreaking havoc at an airport, a Department of Energy solution as well. So that's something we're looking at very, very closely.
So there's lots of different aspects to it. Where do you see the need for counter-UAS systems, and how have agencies and customers been expressing, what requirements they have? You mentioned swarming technology.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start there. There's a need everywhere, and we at SAIC, as we've attacked this problem and evolved our solution set, we've done it holistically, and not only holistically within the customer base, but also within the company and the lines of business. So in the civilian sector, whether it's the TSA or FBI or Homeland Security, certainly a need, and those ongoing conversations are happening. In the Department of Defense, on the Navy side, whether it's counter-UAS as a service within their protecting stateside bases or international bases. On the Army side, whether it's a pilot program that's just been recently competed for down at Redstone Arsenal. Taking a look at all of that. And then, of course, because we're in this unique situation of supporting Ukraine, there's a demand signal there as well.
I think also you're seeing it's almost a race between unmanned aerial systems and just unmanned systems in general and the counter of that. So there's, a tit for tat going on about how do the unmanned systems, how they are advancing with their technologies and how the counter of those technologies is advancing too, across the spectrum of detecting them, identifying them, whether they're friendly or whether they're right? Just inert, tracking them, and of course mitigating them in different forms and fashions. And I think we're seeing a kind of a bounce back and forth of both the advances in the unmanned aerial system side as well as how do we counter those threats.
So there's several different components. You have a sensing component, communications or collaboration component, and then some way to actually take out the unmanned system, either through jamming or through a hard kill.
Yeah,
Can you talk a little bit about those components?
We talk about the term defeat. Right?
Defeat.
So it isn't necessarily kill or capture. It could be capture. It could be take control, cyber takeover. It could be geofence, and it could be kinetic in our solution.
Okay. All right. So again, what are some of the current capabilities and how do they vary across different platforms and technologies? Are there some that are simply sort of like an electronic warfare solution, or some that are just guiding a traditional gun system, or the newer directed energy systems? How and what types of platforms are they on ground vehicles and naval vessels? Can you talk a little bit about that, the different technologies involved and platforms that they're mounted on?
So I think you're going to see platforms across the board. So mobile, fixed, very lightweight, man portable, trailer based. So you'll see all sorts, and I think we see a need and a demand for all sorts of both size as well as, and in general, for the more sophisticated needs, we see our customers looking for a multi-layered approach. So not a singular threaded approach. You want to have multiple ways to detect in case one of those, potentially there's an emerging threat that you haven't considered, and you need a way to capture that on the detection side and the identification side. So you want a multi-layered approach, not just a single way to, whether it's electronic or EOIR. You want multiple ways to detect it and then multiple ways to engage it, because you may not always want a kinetic engagement for the mitigation phase as well. You may want to capture it because there may be some valuable intel that you can gather from that, or you may be in a scenario or geography where you don't want to deploy a kinetic means for multiple reasons. So I think we're seeing a demand for multi-layered, kind of multifunctional approaches. Obviously that drives the complexity. So you also need a way to drive, some autonomy and automation in that kill chain itself. And so we fundamentally have invested a lot of effort and money in the command and control aspect, as well as applying AI in ways that we could automate and accelerate that kill chain.
Yeah, and we've been at it a long time, right? So we've certainly been at it for the better part of the last decade and have learned a ton about that. And through that process, we've, as a technology agnostic integrator and as the premier integrator of ensuring that maximum capability is delivered through the minimum amount of product, we have a series of companies and tremendous partners and partnerships across many, many years that are our best of breed. They're in our bullpen, if you will, and whatever that requirement is, we can then reach to them and say, okay, this solution requires an EW, or it requires a non-kinetic solution. So let's go to some of our best of breed folks in that space. Or this is a kinetic solution, so we're working with new companies. We've had the great pleasure and privilege to demonstrate now 3 times on some Western test ranges here in the United States of our capability. And each time we brought some of the same partners and we brought some different partners, depending on what the scenarios were or what was asked of us. So we have a competition, of course, within the greater business space in the market of counter UAS, but we also have a competition internally to SAIC and that best of breed partnership that are vying to be that next generation solution, keep up with that technology advancements and be incredibly relevant at the appropriate speed so that we can, again, tackle the tailorable, layered, scalable solution that Josh talks about.
So you have to have a team of companies that provide all of these different technologies, and then SAIC basically serves as the integrator.
And that's where we think our one of our primary advantages is. The other thing that we bring to the fight is that we are largely, at least in my business down in Huntsville, comprised of a lot of veterans and presence. So they think in a manner that is, in the Department of Defense type space, but also folks in the civilian BU, business unit, or other places where you take that premier engineering and that premier innovative space and innovative capability, you marry it up with an operational or a tactical type of thought process with our customers and understand the requirements, and then provide that menu. And that menu becomes very, very powerful because now there's an affordability component with it. There's a supply chain component with it that we can be very, very responsive along the way.
I think, Brad, too, there's interesting dynamics just in the market itself when you think about countering unmanned aerial systems. Just the number of companies across the globe that are involved in if you break it down in the different phases of the the kill chain of counter UAS, from the detection. There's dozens of companies working on advanced detection techniques. Some have been in the market for a long time. Some are just emerging. There's a lot of investment, private investment going into these firms as they see opportunities in the commercial space, in the critical infrastructure protection space, as well as the defense market. And right now, it seems like the bulk of the buying is, around the defense national security space. But, over the course of the next few years, that may pivot as things get a little bit more cheaper in terms of the technology, and some of the threats proliferate.
And so my understanding, you can tailor a solution. You have the intense military environment, but you could also protect a nuclear power plant, protect a Super Bowl.
No doubt.
Those kinds of still dangerous, but not quite as intense applications.
Local airports, some of the most critical airports.
Even if it's just a nuisance, you can cover that as well. Right. Kids out there being a nuisance, you can help with that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's almost like buying insurance, right? You don't know you need it until you need it, right? And I think when the economics of buying a robust solution for the kind of threat that whatever environment you may be facing is, then I think we'll see more and more in the commercial spaces, across the world. Private individuals that may want to protect some of their, or businesses that may want to protect some of their. You think about corporate espionage that may be, levied using unmanned aerial systems or other unmanned systems. Companies may want to protect themselves, just like, a critical piece of critical infrastructure or a defense establishment.
Okay, very, very good. What research and development efforts are needed to advance the state of technologies going forward as people, as adversaries become better at deploying and weaponizing unmanned aerial systems? What R&D needs to take place now so that you're ready for the future?
So I think the biggest thing that we're looking at kind of over the horizon is there's pretty good solutions for engaging single unmanned aerial systems right now. The real challenge is how do you handle swarms, multiple UAVs, UASs, maybe from multiple directions, things that would kind of clog our current systems and approaches. So that's certainly the next wave of R&D. It's already ongoing, but that's really the next necessary advance, because we can imagine any unmanned systems, both in the air, in the ground, on the sea, under the sea, swarms of uncrewed systems being deployed. So that's kind of the next phase that I'm seeing. Greg, you're a lot closer to it.
Yeah, so you spent a lot of years in the Army and the R&D environment space, and something that you have to almost always start with is the network. And the network is always a challenge as you work through. So understanding the network of whatever the customer is, that could be a civilian network within the FAA. It could be the military network or the comms network within our DoD. It could be networks within each of the services. Understanding and continuing to advance with those networks and being truly that technology agnostic integrator. Now, a lot of folks are going to say that they can integrate, and that's a true statement. A lot of folks can say that they have an open systems approach or an open system idea, and that may be true to some degree. A lot of folks will say AI and ML. Understanding first the network, how to communicate, understanding how you integrate each of the components, and being flexible enough where the standards have been defined properly. So from a research and development side, which of these open system standards are most applicable? Which ones are easiest to integrate from not only our side of the fence, but also within the DoD or the civilian agencies or what we've already talked about. So you understand the codes, the building codes, and the interoperability pieces of it, understand how the network operates, and then understand how to control it. So one common misnomer we get sometimes is that our command and control is trying to supplant existing command and control systems that already exist within different frameworks. Again, civilian FAA, DoD, et cetera. Nothing could be further from the truth in the sense that we can interface with those, we can understand the codes, and we can understand how to talk appropriately so that the network is incredibly reliable, it is redundant, and it is effective in whatever mission we're asked to perform.
So software is really, really key here.
No doubt. And we bring that, down in Huntsville, we bring that 5-decade pedigree of software development that has been a staple for the U.S. Army, but frankly also through many different pieces of the DoD and other markets based right out of there at Redstone Arsenal, Alabama.
And one of the things, kind of touching back on software and the complexities, right? Just looking at a single UAS that you're engaging in, that's fairly simple from a command and control standpoint and engagement. And then ultimately a decision of, are you going to engage this threat and how are you going to engage it? That's fairly simple. When you start integrating it into maybe a larger, surveillance system, base protection system, force protection system, in a complex scenario, you add in swarms, potentially multiple threats from multiple directions. So what we're trying to do is to reduce the complexity and the cognitive load for those decision makers about A, is it a threat? And B, when and how can you engage it? And what's the best course of action? So trying to simplify that, and we're using AI to bring that course of action more quickly as well as more clearly. So it's not supplanting, as Greg said, right, a human in the loop. We're kind of a human on the loop eventually. And then, from a policy standpoint, right, there's ultimate questions longer term about, right, how much automation do we want to put in any of these kind of systems, right? Whether it's on the UAS offensive side regarding swarms or whether it's on the countering UAS side.
And that's something I've noticed over the years too, as a defense analyst, is SAIC's always been very good about being able to be the honest broker in the middle between especially government customers and commercial software providers, commercial technology providers, because the operations and what the requirements are, but your customers may not know what's available out there in the civilian world that could be applied. And a lot of civilian companies are hesitant or tentative to deal with the government because it's bureaucratic and difficult to deal with. So you're sort of in an ideal position there to broker good solutions.
Yeah, and there's the company's got many examples. One of the most recent examples of being that third-party verification arm for the government is within the Program Executive Office for Aviation and the Future Attack Reconnaissance Aircraft and Future Long-Range Assault Aircraft, where we're validating the digital backbones of those systems, no different than a counter UAS system would be, or a force protection system would be, or anything else for the like. Is it truly open? Are the building standards and the codes proper and acknowledged? And then how much time does it take? Nothing more frustrating than operating a system that is software cumbersome and very, very difficult for maybe even one person or more people to navigate through and to work through.
And there's a lot of excitement. You talked about kind of the pedigree of SAIC. I would say there's a tremendous amount of excitement from Nazik, our CEO, all the way down to the counter UAS team that's working this across multiple business units, because this mission set and our solution, it fits right in our company's purpose, which is advancing the power of technology to serve and protect our world. So it's really part of our DNA. It's a nice example of a challenging problem that many organizations are facing. Many of our customers across the federal government either are facing directly today or will face in the future. So, we're really excited just to kind of dig in and sit side by side with our customers to solve this problem, because there's lots of technology that's emerging. And again, we think the right play is not necessarily focusing on a hardware solution, but how can we rapidly integrate? And Greg's team, I think, was able to integrate a brand new technology in a matter of a couple of days. So I think it's that speed, because the threat, as you know, the threats are changing almost on a daily basis. So you need that flexibility and agility to really change your solution to countering those threats.
Yeah, we talk about looking with pride in both directions. So it's not only the future, but it's also the legacy systems that we have a footprint on, that we can then have that impact and also tie them all together appropriately to get exactly what Josh is saying and integrate appropriately to solve those problems.
Yeah, and it ties into so many different areas as well. The joint all-domain command and control, the larger missile defense environment, just being more efficient, with information collaboration in general. It's a lot of good
we've
times
seen,
there.
right? We've seen Ukraine, and we'll see it, till the end of time, the importance of the fires community. And as the fires community evolves, we will evolve with it and continue to stay pace and side by side with whatever evolution is required.
Yeah, very good. The last question I have for you is, so we talked about SAIC in general, but what really makes the SAIC counter UAS solution unique in a nutshell compared to some of the other companies that have a product?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that make it unique internally as I've watched it over the last 18 months and watched the team really evolve with what we had, use that pedigree and that experience, but the innovative nature of how we're getting after it, the understanding of all of the different markets and all of the different customer base, the ability to collaborate across the power of SAIC and the 26,000 folks that work for the company, and then the tireless commitment to solving those, the solution is really exciting, as Josh has said, and really powerful for our team.
Yeah, and I would just add, we talked a little bit about the modular and open systems approach. We think that's key, especially in this particular, mission area, is being able to rapidly integrate new technologies and new approaches. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about the technology to solve these kind of problems, but it's about the ConOps. It's about, how you stitch this, the overall solution together, and how quickly and rapidly you can integrate and kind of evolve the solution as well. And we're focused singularly on that, and we'll continue to.
Okay, very good. Tiffany, do we have some questions from the audience?
We certainly do. So Tommy asks, I'm interested in how the tech solutions are effective against threat UAS swarms. I'd also appreciate any discussion on how solutions integrate into Army integrated air defense architecture.
Great.
Great. So first of all, relative to swarms, so a part of what we've done, I've talked about the Western test ranges a few times, and I've talked about how we've been going out there about every quarter for the last 2 years. One of those demonstrations that we did for the Rapid Capabilities and Critical Technologies Office down at Redstone Arsenal was to test a high-powered microwave and to integrate to that high-powered microwave. Now, of course, we don't make that kit. It's one of our partners, but that was an early look for the government to see all those different size, weight, power challenges along the way to get after that. The second piece of it, in terms of the fires community, I've already spoke to this a little bit, the integrated fires network and all of that discussion. So we are talking every hour, it seems, and sometimes late into the evening with the fires community and with the folks down both at Fort Sill and at Redstone Arsenal to understand. And it goes back to, yes, we have a software solution that ties our pieces of the puzzle together, but our last demonstration at the Western Test Range actually talked about or actually utilized a different command and control system where we had integrated into and just didn't have to use our system at all. So modular, open, scalable, tailorable, all those words apply, but also on the software side and the greater network, we're having those conversations, we're at the table, and we're understanding exactly what's required as we move forward.
I think I think about swarms too, if you think about how the swarms themselves are controlled, right? Is it one operator controlling 20 UASs? Is it one operator controlling one UAS that's kind of the master, and the others are controlled by that one? Or are they all completely autonomous, right? Disconnected and operating in a fully autonomous fashion, separate. So depending on how they're operating, right, we also have to tailor the mitigation mechanisms too. even in the electromagnetic warfare side of things. So I think, as we think about the evolution of those swarm threats and how they're controlled, we'll have to think about how we adapt our countering those as well.
Okay.
Yeah. We have another question, Tiffany?
Yes, so Evan asks, how do you see industry helping to bring about integration between the different services approaching joint counter-UAS efforts together, either outside or within the Joint Counter-UAS Aircraft Systems Office or independently?
You mentioned you've done quite a bit of work with the Army, the other services as well?
Yeah, our last demonstration in May, and Josh and I were both present for that out in the Western Test Ranges there. Army was present, the Navy was present, the Marine Corps was present. I was in the Pentagon yesterday speaking to the Joint Capabilities Office and the JRAC office within the Office of Secretary of Defense. So the conversation's ongoing. There's a great understanding, and I tip my cap to the Joint Capabilities Office and the folks there that have done a really, really nice job of coalescing all of the available technologies, everybody that can participate or that can bring something to the fight. Our very first demonstration, there were 26 proposed companies to demonstrate. From that 26, they whittled it down to 10 oral examinations. And then from there, 5 of us were fortunate enough to go out and to test our kit. Now, that was back in April of 22. Since then, we continue to learn, continue to grow, continue to be a part of that dialogue within those offices. So there are no surprises, I don't think, across the services. And frankly, I don't think there's any surprises in other markets as well. And we'll see some language, hopefully, on the civilian front that'll come out of the NDAA and folks, other bills that are being prosecuted as we speak through Congress. So the conversations are live, it's well, and folks kind of understand where and what they bring to the fight.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. So we've seen that the counter-UAS market is essential. It's large, it's growing. SAIC has a unique solution, and we want to thank everyone for joining us today. And you can learn more at SAIC.com. Thank you very much for tuning in.